Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Becoming Secure. I'm your host, Emily, dating and relationship coach specializing in all things attachment. And I'm super excited for today's episode because I'm actually interviewing one of my clients, Rachel, about her experience doing one-on-one work with me. And I've gotten to see her over the last, what has it been, like 8 or 9 months, something like
Yeah,
that,
I
like
think
the
so.
better part of a year, and just see how much she's grown and like different seasons that she's gone through. So I'm super excited to have her share her story today, her experiences. And I know there's going to be so many just insights and nuggets for all of you listening. So, Rachel, will you start out by giving us a little bit of an introduction to who you are, what you do, all those things?
Of course. So I'm Rachel. Like you said, I'm 26 and I am a lawyer in Alabama. And like you said, we've been working together for like 9 months. And I truly feel like I tell you all the time, like my life has just changed in so many ways since working together. So I'm excited to do this episode.
Amazing. I'm so excited to dive into more of this with you. And I always love getting your messages where you're like, oh my gosh, this other amazing thing has happened. And like, oh my gosh, this is so different from me like a year ago or things like that. So I know we're going to have lots of good stories and things to talk about today. So, Rachel, will you begin by telling the listeners a bit about what prompted you to want to work together? What was life like about 9 months ago? What were some of your challenges and things you were going through?
So 9 months ago, I would say I am just a very self-critical person. I was very critical of myself, how I was showing up in relationships, and very much felt like I was this huge problem and I had these huge issues that I just had tried to fix for years and I couldn't. And I think I saw you on Instagram, maybe like a couple reels, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's talking about how it's your nervous system. And it just really resonated with me because I felt like my reactions to things, like I'm a logical person, but they were not logical at all. And I was like, it's just how I feel, and there's no way to change that. And you just seemed to me to like give a way of like, okay, well, we're going to identify why you feel that way and we can change your reactions. And I've never worked with someone who thought about it like that. So I thought, okay, you know what? Let's just invest in myself. Let's try this. 2026. That's what year it is, right? No, it's 2025.
2025?
It's like 2025 is the year of, investing in myself and changing these things. And I'm really glad I did. So I think 9 months ago, that's where I was at. How about
Okay,
you?
amazing. And tell us, like, were you single? Were you in a relationship? What were some of your goals maybe when you came into working together?
So I was in a relationship and I felt like it was going super well, except for me. I was like, I'm causing all these problems. My insecurities are making it unhealthy. And I felt like I was changing my partner, who was super healthy, into something unhealthy because of myself and my own baggage. And so I wanted to work with you to be able to show up better in my relationship.
I love that. And so, what are some of the things now? Let's kind of fast forward like a few months. So maybe like 3 months later, not quite to where you are now. What are some of the things that began shifting for you pretty quickly? What are some of the things that changed for you upon starting our work together?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you help me realize that, everyone says your feelings are valid, and they are, but it's more of like okay, here's how you feel, and like it's very valid, but let's talk about why you feel that way. Like you're not mad about a text message or a picture. You're mad about or you're hurt because you feel abandoned or whatever that underlying that core wound is as you talk about. And then from there I could realize, okay, I'm not mad about this text. I'm mad because I feel abandoned and that stems from this. And so like I could then communicate to my partner, this is how I feel and how I acted was not fair or right, but here's where it's coming from. And then I could slowly over time, and this is where I think I'm starting to get to now, like you change the way you think about things. So instead of it being a process of, okay, stop, identify, see what needs to change, I'm slowly becoming like, okay, I see it, I identify it, and my natural reaction is the thing that we've worked so hard to get to for months.
Yeah, it's something that does become second nature when it's kind of ironic because I think we focus so much on like fixing the behavior. Like,
Hmm.
I need to stop spiraling. I need to stop reacting this way or this or that. When like that's actually the result of doing the emotional work and the nervous system work. It's like the behavior actually naturally starts to change over time. And when we stop focusing so much on the behavior and more on tending to the emotions, it happens so much easier and so much more quickly. So, yeah, what were some of the impacts on your relationship when you started doing that?
I think first I realized like there are things that I was, reacting at out of a core wound, but there were also things that I think were valid. And it was nice to be able to talk to someone else and be like, okay, no, this way this was handled really upset me. And for you to be like, okay, and I can understand where the other person's coming from now as well, right? And so then I could approach my partner and say, okay, you're probably not mad at me about this, or the way love is this way, and that's because this is what you saw growing up. And so I could not only identify things in myself, but I identify them in my partner, which is good for me because I think I often choose people that may be chaotic. That's just been something I always do because a lot of the times, if you grow up in chaos, it's what you search for. And so it's nice to be able to identify instead of I'm the problem all the time, which girl, I definitely was. Like I'm trust me, not perfect and still am not. But it was also nice to be able to take a step back and instead of questioning like, am I the problem? Is he the problem? To be able to look at things objectively and say like, okay, here's where I'm going wrong, here's where they're going wrong, and realize like we're either gonna fix these things and they're gonna match up, or these are just things that we have that are so fundamentally different and they don't match up. And I think working with you has helped me realize that because in the past I was very much like, you date to marry and like we're gonna fix these problems no matter what. And now I'm like, yeah, you're still dating to marry, right? I'm not dating to date for the rest of my life, but it's now, okay, I identify how you show up and how you attach, and it's either like, I'm going to communicate how I feel and you're going to change that, or I'm going to communicate how I feel and you can't show up that way or you don't want to. And that's okay. But I feel much more comfortable being able to recognize that now and walk away from what's not good for me instead of trying to like cling on and make myself, fit into this dynamic where I just don't fit.
Yeah, 100%. Oh my gosh, those are such good things you touched on. And I think that's such a common challenge for women who have, whether it's anxious attachment or one of the avoidant attachments, of determining like, is is the dynamic in the relationship right now just me? Am I the whole problem? Or are there things that are valid concerns? And when you have so much anxiety or just so many triggers and you don't know how to work through them and recognize what's happening, it can be so hard to actually navigate. Like, is this a healthy dynamic at all? Or is it even possible for this to be healthy? Or is the other person too kind of stuck in their wounding and not willing to, or not able, just not having the capacity to meet you in the ways that you are showing up to the relationship? So yeah, so important, and something that I think a lot of people really struggle with in this attachment realm of things. So one thing that let's continue talking a little bit about the journey. So tell us kind of what was the culmination of this relationship experience for you. How did things kind of how did you maybe come to the realizations or the discoveries, and what was ultimately how did this relationship work out for you?
Well, I think a big thing that I have struggled with and still do is boundaries, like whether it's family, friends, strangers, or romantic relationships. And I think working with you helped me realize I was very much like I wouldn't set boundaries. And then all these little things would happen. And I'd be like, okay, here's my boundary, hard stop. You can't cross it, and it would come out of nowhere. And you have taught me like, A, set boundaries from the beginning, which feels so weird for me. Like whether it is, like I said, a stranger or someone I'm in a relationship with, it feels weird because I just want to give and give and give, and I expect the other person to understand and respect that. And no one can do that if you don't tell them what your boundaries are, right? And so what I started doing is I started setting boundaries, and I would realize when they were crossed, and I would start to realize that the grace that I give people for crossing boundaries, I guess just doesn't need to happen. Like you really taught me that like when people love you and care about you, they're going to respect your boundaries. And yeah, people are going to make mistakes, whatever, but I'm talking about like a continuous crossing of firm set boundaries that I've communicated. And that's what I think realized for me in that relationship, which I'm no longer in, is that there was just I had sucked at setting boundaries at first. And then as I started to set them over time, I just realized that the partner I was with, we weren't on the same page for what we wanted them to be. And so it made me realize, like, again, no one's wrong or right, but I could see what I had been doing wrong. And then once I started showing up and changing the way I was showing up, I realized, like, okay, well, this just isn't fitting well into what I want from a relationship.
100%. And I think that is something. like what you just hit on is one of the most important things for vetting and determining if someone is a healthy partner and is a compatible partner with you. I think you can't really determine how healthy someone is if you're not showing up to the relationship in a healthy way. And so one of the surest things that will help you get that clarity is you starting to work on showing up where you're communicating well, you're setting boundaries, you're regulating through your triggers and really bringing to the relationship what you want to be the standard and seeing if the other person can meet you there. And it provides so much clarity when you kind of clean up your end of things and then you can see, oh, now I see what messes theirs. And is this going to work or is it not? And I know that that was something that was challenging for you to kind of go through that process. It's not this like beautiful, clean, easy experience. Like these things are messy and it definitely has its challenges. And you really like put in, the work and you made a lot of hard decisions and did a lot of things that felt really scary. When you haven't grown up setting boundaries or knowing how to, it can feel like so overwhelming and just nearly impossible. So yeah, it was really, really amazing getting to watch you go through that experience.
Yeah.
So I don't want to interrupt if you had anything else you wanted to add there.
No, I was just gonna add on. It sounds so cheesy, but you know the whole like you can't love anyone until you love yourself. Like, and in a weird way, I feel like that's what it kind of came out to, right? It's not like that I didn't love myself. I love who I am and the things I've done, but it's more honestly like respect for yourself. Like I was continuously like seriously, whether it was 'cause Emily, I remember there was a guy who asked me for coffee once, and like I didn't want to get coffee with him. I didn't want to go to lunch with him. I didn't want to go to dinner, and it was like someone I knew in a professional sense, or I could have known in a professional sense as well. And I remember I told you I was like, I'm just gonna say like I'm not available or whatever, and you were like, why don't you just tell him no? And I said, I can't do that. What do you mean? And she was like, why can't you? Like, no one has a right to your time. And that what I think is just something that kind of blew my mind. And then I realized as well, in the same sense of relationships, right? It's like, okay, but my partner crossed my boundaries, but that's my partner. But that's not how it works. Like someone who respects you and loves you won't do that. And like the thing with the guy who asked me to coffee, I said no. And now I've seen him since then, and it's not awkward. I'm allowed to be like, hey, it's good to see you because it is, but it doesn't mean I want to get coffee or lunch with you. You know what I mean? So I think that those little ways of like love yourself before you love someone else, honestly, it's just have respect for yourself because why would other people respect your boundaries if you're not enforcing them? And so that's just changed my outlook, like I said, in so many aspects of my life.
I love that. And you are touching on something that I think a lot of women feel like kind of weird feelings about, which is this whole idea of like this guilt and shame that comes up when it's like, oh, you just don't love yourself. And that's why you're in these cycles or tolerating these things. And it's more nuanced than that, right? I mean, kind of like you said, maybe it's a respect thing, or it's just the fact that we are used to certain um, like ways of operating in relationships that were literally given to us. We have a blueprint, and if your boundaries weren't respected or allowed growing up, then you're not going to know that that's something you can do as an adult. And it's just a skill that you can learn at any point, and there doesn't have to be all this shame and guilt about it. It is going to feel a little uncomfortable through the learning process, but it's not anything about how you maybe don't love yourself. It's a lot of just repeating what feels familiar and being afraid of the things that are new and unfamiliar.
And the breakthroughs that I've had with you, this is very dramatic. But I remember when I said no to coffee to that person, I voice memoed you and I was like, again, this person is not Ted Bundy. But I remember saying, like, you hear these stories about these women that like got dinner with Ted Bundy and like they were uncomfortable by him, but they didn't want to say no. And it's stuff like that where I'm like, wow, like it really is just you can say no to get no one owes you don't owe anyone your time, like especially people you don't know. So it's truly like even just women in society in general, I think you're right. It's like a pervasive problem.
100%. So many of that like people pleasing kind of conditioning and
Yes, yeah. We've talked about that a lot.
100%. 100%. So, what are some of the biggest shifts that you have seen? Whether that is, I know there were things that shifted in your relationship, but just in our time from working together, what are some of the big things that stand out to you that are different from Rachel like 9 months ago, or even versus Rachel a year ago?
I think one, like speaking more about my feelings and being more vulnerable, whether it's with my friends or like I tell people at work, like I had an interaction earlier this week where I said something in someone's office and I went home and I thought about it for an hour. And I was like, it's really going to bug me if I don't readdress it. And I went back to his office and I was like, hey, I just want to let you know I didn't like how I said this. This is what I meant. And he was like, I didn't even think twice about it. But, it made me feel better. And the fact that I felt comfortable even doing that was crazy. Talking with my friends about my feelings, talking about my feelings with my family. Like I've had conversations with my parents where they literally sat down with me and they said, like, we would never talk to our parents this way. Like, we wouldn't tell them how we're feeling or why what they said bothered us. It's just not how we worked. And I told him, I said, that's fine if that's how you want to operate, but I want to be close with you. And like, you're telling me you weren't close with your parents. I want to be close with you. This is how we do it. And like, my parents are open to doing that too, which is mind blowing and crazy. So I think being vulnerable has been a huge change for me.
How has that changed how you've actually felt in your relationships?
Well, going through a breakup, I think it's tricky because being vulnerable with someone you're no longer seeing is hard, right? But I was able to better communicate how I felt, the good and the bad throughout that process. And like talking to my friends about it as well was also good. And then B, just dating now, I'm an avoidant, as we've discussed. But instead of seeing things as like a game or like, okay, well, he hasn't been vulnerable, why would I be? I'm now much more comfortable. And I sent you a voice note about this morning. Like I'm gonna show up how I would show up normally. And if that is me being vulnerable or being flirty with the potential of being left on red or not being responded to, I don't care because that's who I am and that's how I'm going to show up. And if the person I'm talking to doesn't reciprocate that, it's no longer oh my gosh, it's what did I do wrong? What's my worth? They either aren't willing to do that or they don't have the capacity to do that. And it's more realizing that then that's just not my person, right? And I'm going to keep showing up how I want to. And I think it's opened up relationships for me just all across the board, romantic and not.
I love that. I love it. I love it. And I remember you talking a while ago, I think about how um, some of your challenges with like female friendships in particular. Do you want to share anything about that and how things are
Yeah,
different now?
that's a really good one. Um, I think we've talked about before. I felt weird showing up in a lot of female friendships, not all of them. Like, it's a ton of great female friends, but especially new ones. And I think it comes from a place of like a fear of rejection, right? So if there's a group of girls, I really struggle getting into that. And again, being more vulnerable has helped me because just the way I think about things now, it's one of the first things we worked on. It's like, I think, okay, they're excluding me. And you told me like there are 15 other things that could be happening. They could be busy, they themselves feel excluded. It could be all these different things. And so instead of making assumptions with female friends, I just go in open-minded and B, I go in more vulnerable, right? And sure, there's still friendships where we just don't click and we're not going to, but instead of me having this more guarded feeling like you can feel it in your chest, when you walk up to them, I'm much more open now. And I think I've developed deeper female friendships because of that.
Yeah, I remember you talking a bit about how some of your friendships maybe felt a little bit more like surface level, and it's like, how do I
Oh yeah.
develop these kind of deeper connections? And what was like maybe the realization that you came to there and like how to remedy that?
Oh my gosh. Well, with the friends that I do have, it has gotten so much deeper. Like I have talked to every one of my friends about you, about coaching, about attachment styles. And my most non-vulnerable friend visited me a couple weeks ago and she sent me a YouTube video about attachment styles the Monday after she left. And I almost cried. I was like, oh my gosh, look at this. So I really do think, or like I told you, I had a friend who had like a whatever a couple weekends ago after something went down with her and a guy and I felt like you, Emily. I was like, okay, not here's why you did this, but I was like, here's what you did. Let's think about, did you do it because this you wanted to do it in the moment, or did you do it because you felt rejected and you were looking for this. And so it's also helped me have those conversations with other women and I'm able to say like, listen girl, I was you, like 3 months ago I would have done the same thing. So it's really helped me in the female friendship aspect and deepening them as well.
I love that. And it's the whole thing of like rising together. Like as you
Hmm.
work on things, you're kind of helping hold the people in your life to a higher standard too. And
Yeah.
that inspires me so much. Um, so is there anything else you want to add about how has this work actually impacted you in your work or maybe in different experiences that you've had?
I'm just thinking about the
You're good.
topic.
Like, has it impacted the way that you show up at work or interactions that you've had with different people or like your
Well,
mindset at all?
definitely at work, whether it is like the basic level of just feeling overwhelmed and practicing like our grounding exercises or recognizing like, especially if I have a lot of little tasks going on, I'll get very overwhelmed and to just sit down and be like, okay, what is going on? Like it really is just calming your nervous system. Like it doesn't make sense mentally, but your body is in this zone. And so being able to sit there and ground myself or, pick out the squares that are all across the room, like the exercises we do every session have helped in real life, which I will say is something different than I've ever done before. Like people can tell you, don't be anxious, ground yourself. But now that I actually do it with you and I understand the tools and I can be driving home from work and be thinking like, okay, what can I be thinking about to calm me? It's really helped me in that aspect. And then in showing up at work and showing up with other people, it's also helped me, the vulnerability, which not that I'm like talking about my feelings with people at work, but just being able to open up more from the clamshell I was to like, oh, here's what I did this weekend, or here are my friends. Like that's helped me connect with people. And then the sense of, anything you do, you're never going to feel confident in. And so I feel much better. Like the imposter syndrome, I guess, isn't there as much because I'm like, I'm showing up, I'm making clear, what I'm going to get you, when I'm going to get it to you. We're having clear conversations about things and like just accepting if someone, not that anyone does, but like if someone's gonna yell at me and like scream at me, then that's on them, not on me, instead of living in fear of that.
100%. And I want to kind of jump back to the attachment style thing because I think when you found some of my resources, like probably like a year ago, you thought, what did you think was your attachment
I
style?
was like, I'm an anxious attachment. I remember I told you that on the phone call. I was like, Emily, I'm an anxiously attached person, blah, blah, blah. Because I would like hyper focus on things and I'd be like, oh, like, what other girls is my person talking to? Like, blah, 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 all these things. And I feel like we slowly realized that I'm not.
Yeah, so what does it turn out your attachment
I'm
style?
a no, yeah,
Yeah.
fearful avoidant.
Fearful avoidant. Yeah. And what are some of the signs of that? Or like what are the ways that you actually see that avoidance side come out? Because this is actually a really common thing. Almost every one of my clients has been like, yeah, I'm anxiously attached. I want to work with you. And then almost all of them have turned out to be fearful avoidance, but they didn't see the avoidance side because there's the anxious and the avoidance side of things. I know this is super common for a lot of people actually. So what are some, like, how did you kind of start to see, like, what were some of those maybe avoidant tendencies that were coming out?
I think it's more well, I wouldn't want to talk about it. Like in
Hmm.
all these videos that you post or other pages post, it's usually I feel like the guy is the avoidant and the girl is the anxious. And every time I see them, I'm like, oh no, I'm the man, you know? But it's like I don't want to deal with the conflict. Like I'm like, okay, let's just talk tomorrow. Or like let's take 4 hours and not talk. Like I just want to shut it down and not talk about it or about the feelings. Like I'm very like logical, I was like, I don't care how you feel or why you feel. Like let's just focus on what's going on right now. And yeah, I think those are the big avoidant things for me. You let me know if I'm missing anything. I'm sure I
Yeah.
am.
Yeah, and it's interesting because with the fearful avoidance, you can have so many different tendencies. There's like so much like variation in it. So even what you're talking about of like feeling overwhelmed and kind of shutting down and being like, I can't talk about this, I don't want to talk about this. That's not a tendency that all fearful avoidants have, but that's more of like the dismissive avoidance side. So 100% that was one that came up for you. And then one of the big ones, which kind of makes sense around the like, who's my partner talking to, is the trust wound. That's one of the really huge things for fearful avoidance.
Oh
And
yeah.
I don't know if you want to talk at all about how that has kind of shown up for you.
Oh yeah. I was going to say the core wounds are, I think, are what have made me most convinced about the attachment styles and the fearful avoidant. Because when we talk through the core wounds, I'm like, oh yeah, like that's my thing. I don't like to feel blindsided. I don't like to look stupid. That's what I've said my whole life is I don't like to look stupid. And that's why I kind of hyper focus on these things because I'm like, well, if I can figure out what you're doing, I'm not going to be caught blindsided. And so that's helped me a lot as well, because that's where it comes from, right? Like you said. And so even now dating, like the uncertainty of dating at the beginning was really stressful for me. And I would try to ask people all these questions and get to know everything I could about them because I was like, I don't want to be blindsided by you. And now again, it's no longer it's not about me. Like it's not about me being blindsided. It's just like how people show up and someone I'm dating or that I've gone on 2 dates with, I don't need to know everything about. And like just much more comfortable realizing that like that is what the wound is and that's why I feel that way and why I show up in certain ways to try to counteract it and then being able to say like okay, this is coming from a wound that is from something long ago, like it's nothing this person in this moment did, and so I can recognize that and have that in mind as I move forward in the relationship with them.
100%. And will you share a little bit about like kind of your relationship patterns before now? Like what sorts of relation? I know you mentioned they were a little bit chaotic, and I know one thing you also mentioned was kind of like the struggle of being alone. I think those are some things that a lot of women struggle with. So what was your experience like?
So my friends, I have literally a hoodie that says serial monogamous. Like I have dated someone since like seventh grade, like always. I would break up for 2 or 3 months and then I'd find somebody else. And it was always like I'd meet someone and I've told you this, like we'd talk every day. Like there, we'd start talking every day and we wouldn't stop talking until we broke up a year and a half or 2 years later. Like that was just the pattern that I was in and what I thought was normal. Sorry, you said something else.
And the kind of struggling with being
Oh.
alone and just like the dynamics maybe of some of those relationships.
Yes, it was very like, and if it wasn't like this, it would make me anxious, but it was very like all the time, like talking to each other every single day, like every hour, like on top of each other. Free time is always spent together. And again, like I thought that was normal. I thought that was how people acted. And I can see now, like it's great to spend time with your partner, but now I'm at the like, and I think I got to this like once I started working with you. It's like I don't need to see you every day. That stemmed from a place of like anxiety and fear. And instead, like I'm now at the place where it's like I've just realized, and I was thinking about this today with you, like you just have to trust that like I cannot monitor you all the time. And like I've just got to trust that you are who you say you are. And that's the hardest thing for me, right? It's like the lack of control and realizing it's completely on this other person, but like I can't control them at the end of the day.
100%, and learning to just kind of like be with that discomfort and just like be your own sense of security through all of it. It's
Yes.
not easy, but building this like foundation with your nervous system and helping instill that sense of like I can feel safe with me is, one of the big pieces of that. But yeah, it doesn't happen overnight and it definitely is challenging and triggers and things come up along the way for sure. And so one thing that I want to ask too, because you were pretty convinced when you first came to work with me that like you were in a super healthy relationship. And then it turned out to not really be the case. And I think there could also be women who are in similar situations. What do you think, if you had to talk to Rachel from like 9 months ago, like, is there anything that would have helped her maybe recognize that she wasn't the whole the whole problem in that situation, or even some of the signs that you started to see that helped you realize, oh, maybe this isn't as healthy of a dynamic as I thought?
I think, and what I keep coming back to is like the boundary setting, like whether it is, and again, it's hard, right? Because I'm an avoidant. So me setting a boundary of like, I don't want to talk to you for 48 hours, like that's not really fair. But I
Yeah,
think
it's a
like,
wall, not a boundary, right?
yes, yeah. But I think like once I started setting like small, healthier boundaries and realizing when those were crossed, just like I would say to myself, like, someone who loves you isn't allowed unlimited access to you. And so I think that's a big thing that I had to learn, right? Because I grew up like there's no boundaries with your family. Like you volunteer your family to do stuff. You say, like, of course she'll be available for these things. If she can't do it, like she's gonna do it. And like recognizing that that's not how relationships work, that when like two grown, independent people are together, like they still have boundaries that they respect with one another. And so I think that is the biggest thing. And just seeing that because I think also as part of it is like if you don't see that, right, it's a lot harder to know what it's supposed to look like. And while I don't think my examples, like I'm not necessarily, I have better examples now, but I think seeing whether it's people that my friends that are in healthy relationships or like talking with you about how things should look like, it makes me realize like, okay, it's much easier to identify what isn't healthy because I can see like what two healthy people together operate like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it does kind of go back to like the importance of doing the work so that
Yeah.
you can see things with more clarity. Because if you haven't seen healthy love, it's really hard to determine what that looks like on your own. Mhm.
And I think, like you said, like on your own, like this is the longest I've ever been single, like in my adult life. And these months have been amazing because I realized, like, okay, this is how I show up for me. This
Mm,
is how I like set boundaries with other people. And now, if I were to get into a relationship, I think I'd feel much more comfortable recognizing, like, okay, this is what I need. And it's okay for me to like need these things in this time. And not testing people, but like making sure that the people that I do commit time to, like, are people that will respect my boundaries and what I need.
hmm Yeah, 100%. 100%. So tell me a little bit about what you had tried like before working together. Had you done therapy or any other kind of self-help sorts of things? And how was this experience different for you?
I definitely had tried therapy before, like going all the way back to college for various things. Like I didn't necessarily think it was like relationship problems, or if I did, I would think I was the problem. And I think what's so different about working with you and what I tell people, like even my, older conservative parents who are like, therapy is ruining the world, whatever. Like I always tell them, like, you are so great because you give me the tools to change things. And I love your focus on the nervous system because I've talked to therapists about everything from like OCD to ADHD to like anxiety. And, not that you and I don't get into that, but what I think a lot of the symptoms, whatever you want to call it. Not that I have any of those, but like the things that I have that make me wonder, like, do I have this? Do I have aspects of this? Like, they all stem from my nervous system, right? Like, if it's a need for control or a need for uniformity, like it comes back because I'm like, okay, I don't feel safe in this space. I need something I can come to. And so, working with you and just identifying, like, okay, this is where these feelings come from, and this is why I'm acting the way I am. I want to say, like, not I mean, I can change all of them, honestly, like, because I really realize, like, okay, this is why I'm doing this. This is where it comes from. So, like, do I need to be acting in this way? And so I just think, like, compared to other therapists I've talked to, where it's great to talk to in session and get through my feelings, like, you have been amazing because you've actually taught me, like, why I feel the way I feel. And so now when I'm in those situations, I think, okay, what am I feeling? Why do I feel like that? Is it valid? Like, how am I going to act based on it? Like, even I sang a voice memo this morning, which I will say the 24-hour messaging is another huge, great part of you as well. Just because sometimes it's nice to be able to yap in the moment about what's going on, especially when I was in the relationship, right? Because like 2 days after, I'll be like, okay, I was crazy. Whereas in the moment, I'm like, yes, I may be crazy, but here's what I'm feeling. But like this morning I voice memoed you and I told you like there's a guy that I'm talking to, and originally what I used to feel was uncertainty when he would text me, or I'd be like, okay, well, he isn't interested in a future with me if he isn't planning things for me. And now it's like, okay, I take how he feel or take how he acts, and I, not internalize it, but I hear it, I see it, I recognize either he's showing up or he's not. And instead of feeling like, okay, I'm not good enough for him to plan a date with me or I need to play harder to get, now I'm like, okay, this is what he has the capacity to show up as and to do. And I get to decide like whether that's worth it for me. And I think in the past, I would have felt like, okay, he's not a planner. Like I've got to change him. I've got to make clear that I need plans, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm like, I'm going to communicate that I'm a planner and he's either going to see that and he's going to plan or he's going to see it and he's going to not. And I need to make a decision based on that instead of trying to change someone into who I want them to be. Because then I go into my pattern of spending 2 years trying to change someone into who I think they have the potential to be, when in all reality, like we're just not compatible.
100%. Oh my gosh, I'm like bars. Like I love all of what you said, and you just articulated that so well of like that's so much of what keeps us dating people for their potential, which is a pattern that so many women have, and I've had this too. It's just that like as soon as we see something that doesn't quite work, we're like, oh, let me see if I can change it or fix it, see
Hmm.
if I can get him to meet my needs, whether that's me controlling him in these ways or me trying to prove that I'm good enough for him to change for me or whatever it may be. And instead, stopping and just being like, you know what? Does this work for me? Are we actually compatible here?
Yes.
It doesn't mean anything about me if we're not compatible. It's just that we're different people, and there's someone out there who is compatible with me and someone who is compatible with him, and we don't have to force something here. So
Yes.
100%,
No,
100.
that's definitely like it always would come down to again like the self-worth and respect is really what I think it is because I took it as like a okay, but he's willing to change for me. And I'm imagining us on the altar and him being like, I used to not do these things or I used to be toxic, but I changed for you. And like it is not about that at all. So you are just spot on with that. And I think another thing I'll say is like there's like a lot of talk about being like a high value woman, which I love the idea of. I love being like in your feminine and, understanding you require a certain level of respect. And I never understood how to get there. I thought it was one of those things you just, you Pinterest at night and you wake up and you decide I'm going to be high value. But working with you is what made me realize like the way people become that is truly just because they set boundaries and they respect themselves and they only invest in things that are worth their energy. And like it's not something you just wake up and do overnight, but it truly is just like a self-respect. And learning that has blown my mind. It made me realize how I can be more like that, like and actually doing it instead of just, repinning whatever, Princess Diana.
100%. That is so funny. That is so funny. And it's so true. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, I have one more question for you, Rachel, but before I ask that, is there anything else that you want to share just about your experience or about like the transformation that has taken place for you over the last 9 or so months?
I mean, I tell you this all the time. Like even my interactions with you, right? Because you would always say I'm 24-hour messaging, and I'd be like, all right, whatever, girl. Like I'm gonna see you during my one session, and we'll talk then. And I don't know when I started voice memoing you, but you know that I never stopped. So like, A, just even that sense of being vulnerable with you, I think has been great. B, like you just I say this all the time, but like you really have changed my life. Like whether it is how I show up at work, how I show up in relationships, how I show up with my friends, like I'm just so much more comfortable being myself and setting boundaries. And especially like with my job that takes up so much of my time, like I it was just another thing on my plate that I didn't need to worry about. And now I'm like, I can just show up in every aspect of my life so much better. And I can have these uncomfortable conversations so much better. Now I used to be very uncomfortable setting boundaries, right? But now, once I get through the uncomfiness of setting them, whether it's like friend zoning someone or just saying I'm not interested in coffee, then I'm like, okay, I'm totally fine having a conversation with you now because now I know I've set the boundary and been very clear. Whereas in the past, I would not want to set a boundary. So I'd just be like, oh, I'm not dating right now, or like, oh, I can't do coffee this Friday, another time. And that's not communicating clearly to that person I'm not interested. I would hope they picked up on it. So then every time I'd see them after that, it'd be really awkward because it'd be like, oh, and then I'd have to have that conversation later. And now I'm just so much more comfortable being like, hey, I really just want to be friends. And then now every time I see you, I'm like, what up, friend? And so you just made things a lot easier. I'm avoiding like passive aggressive because I used to be very passive aggressive. And in all reality, it was me just trying to avoid conflict. And so now I feel much more comfortable like setting firm boundaries and saying how I feel and just being able to show up as myself. So I think those are just some really big things that you've helped me with.
100% love it. It's like you have that ability to just like take up more space and not feel like you're having to shrink because you're just setting those boundaries and communicating how you feel, and you're not having to like avoid people to avoid like awkwardness or uncomfortable.
Exactly.
100%. I also feel like I should preface with the messaging that 24 hours doesn't mean I'm responding to my clients 24 hours a day. It just means that they can send me a message whenever. They can send me a message whenever, and then I respond usually within a day or a couple of days. So I'm not up. I'm not. Well, sometimes I am messaging you guys at midnight because I'm also up, and I'm like, ooh, what's the update
What's
on
the
this
tea?
situation that they're in, but I'm not like a 2 a.m. All right, gonna get a message back.
Well, and something I've talked about with you too is like I used to say, you don't have to listen right now, take your time, blah blah blah. And now that we've said that, it's just understood. And even the way that you have responded and interact with me, I've never felt like any sort of way about it, but you have shown like how to set boundaries in a healthy whatever kind of relationship it is. And so even seeing that has helped me so much, right? Because sometimes you're like, hey, I didn't have the capacity to respond to this until this afternoon, and I don't care, but it's such a great way to communicate. And like I've started using that language with people in my life too.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I think that is one of the cool features about doing the one-on-one work is like you get a little bit more access to me, which is different than a lot of therapy or even other kinds of programs. And that relationship shows a little bit more like that dynamic of, oh yeah, this is how I can communicate vulnerably, or this is how I can set or receive a boundary and different things like that. And even we can't ignore that there is a dynamic there. And that's one of the really cool things about attachment work that, like, we can look at that dynamic and address that. And it just becomes another, like, method or opportunity for healing. But that's a whole other thing I could dive into so much more. So, all right, the last thing I want to ask you, Rachel, is what would you say to a woman who is on the fence about joining one of my one-on-one programs? Maybe she's like looked at some pages, seen some posts, and she's like, do I, do I not? I don't know. What am I getting myself into?
Oh, I 100% say do it. Like Emily has changed my life. I show up better in all of my relationships. Like I think about things differently. I never thought that I could have, whether therapy or coaching, anything that would change like my deep, whether it's anxiety or, the way I connect with people. And I truly never thought like I would be at this spot in my life and thinking about like I'm not in another relationship, but I already know like my next relationship is going to be, even if it's not my last, is going to be like so much better because of the things I have learned and talked about with you. My relationships with my family are better. My relationships with my friends are better. Like I have cried talking to my dad. Never in my life would I thought that. Never would I ever think that he would want to have a deeper relationship with me. Now he's like pushing me, and the avoidant in me is like, okay, like this is enough. So like I truly think that anyone who's on the fence about signing up with you should do it. Even if you just want to test it out at first and see how it goes. That's what I thought I was gonna do. And now like I think we're on our third round of, working together. So like you've changed my life. For any woman who thinks that like being anxious or avoidant in a relationship will never change, I think working with you truly helps you realize why you feel the way you do. And while you're not able to go back in time and change things, you can change the way that they present in your life now and how you react based on them.
Ah, that gave me chills the way you said that because that's exactly like the thing about working with the nervous system. Ah, love it. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for coming on today and taking
Of course,
time to be on
thank
the
you.
podcast. You were a wonderful guest, as I knew you would be. And I hope that this episode has been insightful for all of you listening and inspires you and just gives you hope that, like, if you're at a point right now where you're feeling really anxious or avoidant or struggling in relationships or struggling with like how you feel about yourself, that there is so much hope, and just like there are things that will make a significant difference for you. And if you are someone who is looking for some one-on-one support, Attachment Alchemy, my one-on-one program, is now open for enrollment, and you can find all the details for it in the show notes. You can also send me a message on Instagram, and I'm happy to chat with you about whether it's a good fit. Well, I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your day. And until the next episode, I'm wishing you lots of luck and love on your journey towards becoming more secure.